everyone. Welcome back to Miss Baduva's YouTube channel here. I just wanted to touch base again. We're going to just start with a really quick little review of what we learned in that Romantic era reading that we did, I guess, about a month ago now. So this is something that I compiled for all three of the classes, not knowing if the other classes have done that reading just yet. So some of the information at the beginning might be a little bit redundant because we've already done it on our shared doc with all of those things. We had a circle time, we talked about it. But for those of us that weren't here and perhaps we want a bit of a refresher before we re-dive into the Romantic era, we're going to just do that really quickly right now. It won't take too long. I just want us to dive into the sort of historical aspect of the Romantic era before we dive into art song and how that was created tomorrow. So this is the lecture for today, Tuesday, April the 7th. So just take a listen to this, take a look through, watch along with me. It won't take too much of your time, and then you can continue to work on your performances that are due the end of today. Awesome. Here we go. I'm just going to put it into presentation mode. Excellent. And I'm going to move myself a little bit out of the way here, perhaps in the top right corner. Amazing. Okay. So the Romantic movement, art song and piano music. We're focusing only on history aspects of it today. Piano music will come next week. We're going to finish art song by the end of this week. And that's essentially all we're going to have covered for this week. So here we go. Lesson 1. Oh, that's also a really bad place for it. Okay, let's try bottom right corner here. Excellent. Okay, so if the classes that haven't done this already have not yet done the reading, then they're going to complete the Romantic era reading and then fill out the doc provided, which we've already done, so we can just skip through this little area here. Okay, so the approach to literature in the Romantic era. We've now talked about everything being super expression focused. So we're no longer talking about realistic events that are happening in the world and writing only about that, writing stories, poetry, only about things like that. We are talking from the heart and from the soul and from the feelings. So we're not studying human body anymore in a super drastic and dramatic way. We're not writing about those things. We're writing fiction. We're writing love songs. We're writing love poetry. We're writing poetry about the beauty of nature and the beauty of the world. So again, it's not super realistic anymore. There's lots of fantasy coming into play with the folklore. So things like fairy tales and things that are not tangible, that they can't actually see in front of them as they are writing about these things. So a lot of things are being made up. So maybe things like sirens and mermaids and, talking animals, stuff like that. Again, very romantic in nature. We've got lots of love being poured out through the hearts of all of the authors that are involved in the Romantic era. Let's keep going. The Bohemian Ideal. So again, this celebrates the idea of freedom and the outsider. So these people are not sedentary. They are nomadic. They like to be travelers and not be set in one confined box or one confined area for an extended period of time. So we're celebrating the avant-garde, which means out of the box idea, or avant-garde is outside of the gate or outside of something that's guarded. So we're straying away from the guarded, super tight-knit conventions of the classical era, as Beethoven began to do, which we saw last semester, and we're moving now out of that area and out of that zone. So we're no longer being super tightly enclosed by the classical era conventions. We're moving outside of that because we've noticed that fear and risk is totally fine to experience, and we want to embrace that a lot more. Art in the Romantic. So again, no longer realism. As you can see here, this is Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. You don't have a realistic depiction of the night sky. You don't have a realistic depiction of trees. You don't have a super realistic depiction of houses or of the hills and the valleys and the churches, because we're now looking at nature as inspiration, not as something that we want to copy and paste into a picture form. We're not looking at humans as things we want to copy and paste and super really well replicate. We're looking at them again as inspiration, things that we can take a look at and just focus on the imagery and the themes and the thoughts and the ideals that come along with what we see around us, maybe what we don't see around us. So again, we're painting with imagery, not so much realism, and everything is very picturesque. So they're trying to sort of create an all-encompassing theme as opposed to very specific ideals and details. Musical instrument improvement, we have many tech improvements. So the valves, for example, are taking us away from only having to use harmonics. So harmonics are when we're blowing through a tube in in brass instruments, and we just use our breath support and the tightness of our embouchure to produce different higher or lower pitches. So we're moving away from harmonics now. We can now have closer valves and closer notes with different harmonics because we're able to press down on buttons that shorten and lengthen the length of the tubes there. So you can see here on the tuba, because the tuba and the saxophone were invented here in this Romantic era. On the tuba now, we again no longer have just one big long spiral of tubing. We have these little valves here that actually engage or disengage or block off these lengths of tubing here. So we are no longer confined to only one length of tubing in brass instruments. We have the ability to now press buttons and shorten or lengthen the tubing that we blow through. So it's pretty awesome. And the same thing with the saxophone here. That's really cool that we're able to have a longer horn, which gives us a lower sounding instrument with different buttons that we can press to, again, engage different airflow and different tubing that the instrument will require here. So again, you're making music more accessible. Instruments are now no longer just for performing musicians who are making money in the courts of kings and queens. They're accessed by all people that want to learn, including women, which we'll get to in a second. We have the largest orchestras yet. The printing press has made a really huge help in terms of getting music, like sheet music, readily available for people that want to be learning music. And so that's been made a lot more accessible as well. And we talked about the tuba and saxophone being invented already. Awesome. Orchestral development, we have larger orchestras this time. So these are the largest that we've seen so far. So we've got lots of instrumentation. We have different instruments in terms of saxophones and tubas coming into play, different valved instruments. We're still playing with harmonics only instruments as well. So we have this huge wide expansion of the orchestra where we're performing in public concert halls because these tiny little rooms or the courts of kings and queens are no longer doing it for the amount of space that we want. So we have larger performing spaces to accommodate for larger performing musicians now in groups. There are more conservatories established for more and better musicians. So again, music is way more accessible. It's not just part of the church anymore, not just part of the courts of kings and queens. It's not just part of people who are, descendants of Haydn and Mozart and Beethoven and stuff like that, because now we're all working together so that we can create music that's made for public performance and colorful expression, greater dynamic range, more for emotion. It's all about the public and how we can convey our message musically to the public listening. So again, colorful expression through different kinds of instruments being invented. There's a much greater dynamic range, which is helpful through the valves as well. And we're able to now support our breath even more to get through those dynamics in a more positive way, as opposed to only knowing how to play loudly or only knowing how to play quietly. So these are things that we're noticing in the Romantic era. We talked about this a little bit already in the literature section, but again, we have influences of folklore and exoticism. So there were lots of increases in ideas of fantasy and legends that were used in poetry, especially used in art song, but we will also see some of those ideals in orchestral music and in the piano music developed at this time too. Sorry, the dogs. So composers from that time are taking legend inspirations from other countries too. So for example, this looks very similar to a Romanian polka or dance that could be happening. So they're taking ideas from Romanians, Hungarians, Russians, Germans, the French. They're taking all these kinds of dances that they do that are nationalistic in their countries, and now creating music out of those that is exotic in the countries that those things don't belong to. So we're now looking again to the outside world. We're not staying confined within our own little bubble. We're looking to the outside world to continue to explore and expand our knowledge of what music looks like to other people so that we can be just as relevant along the way. Sorry, that's Oscar. He wants to be part of the lecture as well. Melody in the Romantic era. Melody, the idea behind melody was that we're trying to make the instruments sing as well. So of course, as singers, we can be emotive and tell our story that way as well, but we wanted to make the instruments tell stories as well throughout that way. So we had lots of lyricism and emotional appeal. So even though there weren't physically words that the instruments were saying out loud, lots of word painting was happening. We learned word painting in the Renaissance era. We were back to that now. Lots of word painting was happening so that the audience was able to be pulled into the song just as well as the musicians were playing it for them. So again, songs without words was the idea. So we're creating not only these huge orchestral and symphonic movements anymore, but we're creating these shorter pieces that just tell a really, really lovely story for the audience to enjoy, as well as the musicians playing it. Form in the Romantic era. So we've expanded now to allow more time for ideas. So remember we talked about Beethoven's Symphony No. 9 being the longest thus far, which I believe was 47 minutes. I think it was a CD and a half, perhaps. And so the symphony is still the most important form of orchestral music, but now it's expanded into way longer time periods, again, to tell the story. So we're all talking about telling stories as opposed to, okay, I have to cover A, B, A, C, A, B, A. These are my forms. We're now saying, okay, forget the forms. We don't need to worry about rondo form or whatnot. We're now just talking about telling a story in a really powerful way. So we have, again, less symphonies, but they're longer because they're telling multiple stories within each movement. And so it's important for the audience members to be able to totally understand those things as per the wishes of the composers. Excellent. So there we have it. Less symphonies, but longer. Okay, so we now have the emergence of the solo performer in the Romantic too. So again, we're talking like we're wanting to be celebrities and rock stars. Like people really wanted to have fans and be super well known and sort of be like in a new famous position. So we're dominating the concert hall. Again, we're saying goodbye to the courts of the kings and queens, and we all want concerts where all eyes are on composers, all eyes are on musicians. Especially the solo performer in this case. So we have solo singers, we have solo instrument players, we have solo pianists. There's a huge change in who makes music, how and where. So again, the audience is as equal with imagery as the musicians are because we're conveying that message super well that the audience can feel it and can see it from their seats within the concert hall too. So we're playing on a way more equal playing field here, even though these musicians are now seen as celebrities with a super high amount of fame and like screaming fans and stuff like that. And the role of women in the music in the Romantic era. So piano accompaniment, women were in the upper/middle classes who were learning piano. So women who were learning piano or women who were singing or learning to sing, you would often see the people that were accompanied being women in the upper middle classes, as well as people that were playing too, because pianos are still very expensive to afford, and so people that were in the upper and middle classes were a little bit more privileged to be able to have access to that kind of instrument. They're now being trained as singers and instrumentalists. So again, kind of a little bit more equal playing field with the men of the region and of a time period. So again, we're fighting for equality. We are looking to be on that same playing field and not having anything too different, because why can't women be musicians just like men can be musicians and, have celebrity and fame just like men can have celebrity and fame. So a big advocate for this was Clara Schumann, and she was a big composer in the Romantic era as well. And we'll study a few of her pieces throughout the course as well. And so that's it for our review. Tomorrow we're going to do a brief review in art song, what we've learned as well. We'll dive a little bit more into it because I don't think there were a lot of people in class that day. And then we're going to take a look at 3 different types of art song and answer a few questions about them, again, in a shared doc. So keep an eye out for tomorrow's recorded lesson, as well as the shared Google Doc that you can upload your answers to. And then Thursday, I will review those answers alongside you, and we'll go from there. Awesome. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.